Anyway, thank you, David. Thank you, guys. So thank you for choosing to be here today, to be part of this community, whether you're physically in the room in the theater, or you're joining us on Zoom or watching on YouTube now or later. It matters to be in community. It matters to be as present as you can manage for you and for those people that you're in community with. And today, we begin a new month, and we shift our focus from the experience of freedom, which was the topic for last month, to this experience of being in connection, in community, in that experience of belonging. And it always seems a little weird to me to talk about freedom first and community second, but that's how the structure is, so whatever. And there are a couple of viewpoints about the relationship between freedom and connection. And naturally, they're in opposition, right? Because they're always 2 points of view, and they're seldom like friends. One viewpoint is that you have to feel like you belong, are connected and safe, in order to step out and take chances. The opposite viewpoint, which is also true, is sometimes you have to be effectively kicked out of the nest, or you won't have the motivation to go out and explore and seek. So one says, I have to be safe first and feel like I belong in order to explore. And the other one says, you got to throw me out before I will actually take the leap to go find my people. And what you're looking for when you're out exploring is you're looking for your people. You're looking for connection. You're looking for people where you belong, where there is some camaraderie. That's felt. It's a felt experience. And of course, there's even yet a third viewpoint, which is present in child psychology, which says that unless a young person rebels against the status quo or the safety, feature of the parents' generation, the child won't actually grow into their own experience of being an individual. They won't experience what it feels like to be self-empowered and to self-express. So there are all of these points of view about that relationship between belonging and safety and connection and being an individual and being free. And all of them are true. And all of them are appropriate in certain circumstances. And I've said all that, and it's, blah, blah, blah. That's what's true. And that's not what I'm going to talk about this month. Where I'm actually headed is actually a deeper level, which is more personal and more individual than all of that, because that's all very superficial stuff. I mean, we have that experience. We know when we fit. We know when we're comfortable. We know when we're safe. We know when we're not. And yet, there is something inside of us, that individualized connection to this divine presence within, that exists in all beings, whether they know it or not. And that's the place that I'm going to come from for this whole month of August. And when we remember and recognize, without a shadow of a doubt, that we are already part of that infinite reality, that all that is, that whatever you call God, because everybody has a name for God that's theirs, right? When you realize you couldn't possibly be separate from that, it gives stability to the individual so that we each have the wherewithal to move forward in whatever it is that pulls us or calls us or drags us sometimes into that next experience. So, how would your life be different if you believed that you were already completely one in the divine? What would you choose? What would you walk away from? What would you lose? What would you gain? How would your life change if you believed absolutely in the depths of your being that there was that inseparable, immovable, undamageable core of you that was God? It's a beast of a question, right? Because we remember it sometimes. And then some other times it's like, oh my God, I'm by myself. And it's like, no, not really. Because there's that infinite presence that lives within, which is part of our teaching. And it's part of something that is actually a core principle of our teaching. If you look at the Declaration of Principles, half of them talk about that relationship between the individual and the divine within. It's kind of cool, right? So, and everybody doesn't think that. That's not normal. That's not the way the world chooses to see this relationship between the human and the divine. So last December 12th, whether, I don't know if you were here or not, I was, I think, but we were joined by poet John Rodell, who was speaking to us from his home in Wyoming over Zoom, because we were still entirely on Zoom then. And you can watch it again if you go to our Zoom channel, or you can watch it for the first time if you go to our Zoom channel. And there's a little magnifying glass at the top corner of it, and if you type in John Rodell's name, it'll pop up that Sunday service, so you can see it. I watched it again because he's funny. And he's really interesting because he's exploring this idea of what does it mean to have a continuous conversation with the divine, except his divine's out there, which is not unusual. That's where it is for most people. But he's having this conversation and this awareness of the interaction between the human and the divine. And his story reminds me, actually, of Neil Donald Walsh's story. Except Neil wrote out his conversations with God on a yellow legal pad when he was practically homeless and, trying to figure out what was going on in the world. And John did it almost as a joke. Because he started writing his conversations with God, he didn't call him that, on Facebook. And people responded to it. It's like, wow, it's not just me. I'm not the only one that feels this way. And he's done it over the years, and he's gotten quite a bit of feedback from other people going, yeah, that's me too. And listening to him talk to us last December, it's like when God started talking back, and not talking back like the bad way, but communicating, he was stunned. So, yeah, and John got the message. He didn't understand it. He still doesn't understand it. Neither do I some days. But God is love. God is already present in every being, even us, no exceptions. And no one is actually truly broken, deficient, insufficient, limited, inadequate, whatever. We are all whole, perfect, and complete as we are, and we are able to create a different experience. That's hard. Because where does it put the responsibility? I'm the one that has to change how I think. I'm the one that has to change how I feel. I'm the one that has to change how I view what's happening. And how do we know this? Sadly, it's faith, right? Because we have to see with our God eyes. We have to feel with our God mind and our God hearts in order to have that awareness of that divine within. And when we look to somebody outside of us to fix us, they can't. They don't have the skills. They don't have the access. They don't have the tools. They can help. They can support. But they can't actually do the work. And our job is to remember that and to do it over and over and over and over again. One very cool aside about heartbeats, because we have this story in our minds that our heartbeat is steady, right? And God is closer than our breath and more near to us than our heartbeats. Heartbeats are not consistent. A healthy heart has variability. The differences are microseconds. But a heartbeat that is absolutely consistent isn't well. So us having the story in our minds that we have to have everything just so in order for us to be well and happy and enjoy our lives is a story we've made up. There is fluidity and flexibility, not massive changes. I said the difference in heartbeat is microseconds, right? But the folks that study this measure heart rate variability. And when there isn't heart rate variability, that's a sign of stress. So anytime we get too uptight about something, it's like, okay, what's this? Am I trying to control something that's not really in my control? Am I not trusting that divine within? Am I not allowing that presence of the divine as me out? Anyway, I went sideways. So one of John's poems from his book, Hey God, Hey John, which is how it started for him. Hey God, hey John, do you love me? Yes. Unconditionally? Yes. Why? Because I made you. That doesn't seem like a good enough reason for unconditional love. I make horrible mistakes all the time. Yeah, just like everybody else. And just like everybody else, I will continue to love you nonetheless. Nonetheless? Nonetheless. John, I love that word. God, me too. John, and if you love us because you made us, is it really that simple? God says, yeah, right. But we're all such hot, toxic rabbit dung fire down here on earth. God said, I wouldn't say that. I like to think that everybody is simply a perpetual work in progress. John, that must be really frustrating for you. God, not really. Each of you is an early draft of a unique poem. A little rough, but full of potential for great beauty and meaning. John, so our lives are like poems? God, nonetheless. Me, John, I love that word. God, and I love you nonetheless. So how do we hold that thought of that divine presence in us, loving us, living as us, showing up as us, nonetheless, no matter what hot, toxic rabbit dung fire we might be in the middle of? It's practice, right? So Amy Steinberg, who was with us for a Sunday service a couple of years back and did a concert, wrote a song, and I kind of half expected the band to sing it today, but they may be saving it for a different Sunday, called Intimate with the Infinite. The lyrics go like this. Let me be intimate with the infinite. Let me be deeply revealed. one with the knowing, ever present, ever growing. Let me remember what's real. Let me be intimate with the infinite, vulnerable and free. I want to be one with the sweetness, completely one with completeness. Let me be gentle with me, falling in love with everything, falling in love with divinity, falling in love with everyone, because God is in you and God is in me. Let me be intimate with the infinite. Let me be open. I want to sink into the spirit. I feel it. I hear it. I see it in your eyes, that truth. Falling in love with everything, falling in love with divinity, falling in love with everyone because God is in you and God is in me. Think carefully about those words with me for a minute. Amy sang about a desire of her heart, not an expression of something she had constantly or even regularly. Even the great mystics didn't live in God consciousness 24/7. They didn't. They probably visited more often than you and me, but they didn't live there. And I'll never forget the first time I heard the story of Mother Teresa. She had a cosmic consciousness experience when she was a very young nun. And she spent the whole rest of her life wanting it back. And for her, the only thing she knew to get it back was to supplicate and do service. That was her tool. That was her toolbox. It's like, well, if I'm humble enough and I serve enough and if I pray enough, will you come back? What's the difference? It's a mindset shift between God is out there and I have to do something fabulously perfect or whatever in order to be worthy of that connection, versus I recognize that connection lives in me regardless of what's going on in my world. What's it take? What's it take for you to remember that? What does it take for me to remember that? The answer is it varies, right? So how do we become aware of and access the amount of God consciousness that we can stand, that we're willing to allow? I think Dr. Holmes was there more often than not. But when he had the experience in public, he was talking at the Whittier Church. It was a church opening, and he was, doing the blah blah talking thing, and he was giving a wow, this is such a cool place. We're so happy we're here. And suddenly the veil opened, and he got real quiet, and he said, "The veil is thin. I'm going to sit down now." And he stopped talking, and everybody was going, "Where? I want some of that." But he lived in that awareness of that presence. And even he didn't touch it. Mother Teresa didn't touch it with consistency. And there's a whole bunch of stories about mystics who had intermittent experiences, awarenesses of that divine presence. And each one of us does too. Sometimes, and for me it's often in nature, when there's an English word that I love, it's called gobsmacked. When I'm gobsmacked, that it's just so beautiful I can hardly stand it. That's me seeing God, seeing me in the scenery, the waterfall, the mountains, whatever. But Dr. Holmes, in a piece that he wrote called The Cosmic Light, from a little anthology called Light, very original, right? Page 20, very frequently I sit down all alone for 2 hours and listen to the silence And it speaks. And I look into the darkness, and it turns into light. It's there, and there's no question about it. God is warmth, spirit is colorful, the universe is filled with light. A voice speaks from everything, running brooks, stones, trees, animals, moons, stars, deserts, and stillness. And you can listen to the stillness until it speaks to you. And from Benedictine Sister Joan Chitterson, contemplation breaks us open to ourselves. The fruit of contemplation is self-knowledge, not self-justification. So yeah, it's a practice, or practices of practices. And we never arrive as long as we have human bodies. And maybe we're not even done then, when we're done with human bodies. What are the practices? Meditation, obviously. Self-knowledge, self-honesty, non-judgment, forgiveness of self and others, and paying attention to our lives. This is the part that kills me. Thought, word, and deed. Paying attention to our lives, thought, word, and deed. Being love in the world as best we know how. And not beating ourselves up when we fail, but just getting up and trying it again and resuming that practice, because that's what it is. It's a practice of practice of practice. How many of you remember the 21-day challenge of not complaining? The dude that wrote the book, his name was Will Bowen. The book is called A Complaint-Free World. And he started quite a movement back in 2007. Do you still have your purple bracelet? I never made it a full week without complaining. I was pleased I made it a week. It's a fabulous reminder of the continuous or continual nature of practice and how we keep our minds and intentions steady in order to achieve a different life experience. This is no different than that. We have charge of this. This is what determines our experience. We get to decide what kind of experience we're going to have. Damn, that's hard. Oops, I said the word. Oh well. So I went looking for another book from my stack yesterday, and I didn't find it. Instead, I found a copy of Ralph Waldo Trine's 1906 classic, In Tune with the Infinite. Sometimes I wonder if it's too easy to distract ourselves with so much abundance of resources. But that's a conversation for another day. Trine wrote, "The great central fact in human life, in your life and in mine, is the coming into a conscious, vital realization of our oneness with this infinite life and the opening of ourselves fully to this divine inflow." So I want to leave you a question for you to think about. How willing are you to become more infinite, more intimate with the infinite? This is a choice. Each one of us gets to explore and make on a regular basis. It means leaving behind our small view of our safe, protected self, where nothing changes, and we know everybody in our little circle likes us, and it's friendly and it's kind, but there's nothing expansive about it. How big is your definition of the divine? That divine birthright has already been given to every single one of us. Already. We get to decide how much of it we want. So I'm going to close with a poem by a new poet I found a couple of weeks ago. I still don't know how to say her name right, so I'm going to fake it again. I think her name is Chellan. Her last name is Harkin. This poem is called The Light Within You. and it's from her book, Let Us Dance. There is a light that is always within you. You cannot be truly rejected. There is a light that is always within you, that the universe warms herself on. You can never be truly alone. You are made from the essence of the breath of life. What bad salesman has convinced you that death could be real? As we unspin ourselves from illusion, we find everything we've always sought has always been twinkling from within. The richness of the universe, like a coy little secret in our chests. And bit by bit, we discover there was never any shortage of God. Decide how much of that you want, how much you're willing to allow, how much you're willing to express and explore and experience. Do that. Share it. Bless yourself and bless us all. Thank you. So now I'm going to roll into the prayer. And as you know, we pray affirmatively around here. So that is accepting and exclaiming about the good. And recognizing those limiting thoughts, those interruptions and obstacles and interferences, and claiming that even though those exist, they don't have to be the driving force. So if I've said anything useful for you this morning, hold it in your mind while I speak the words. I know that one life, God's life, lives as me, lives as all. And I know that life as already perfect, whole, and complete, right here, right now. I know that life is motivated by love, and I know that that infinite presence already is intimate with each one. That whole and holy presence lives in, as, through, around, for, and by each one. And as we own that, as each one owns that, as we step into this experience of God as us, we have a different experience. And as we do that, we have the ability to share that love, that light, that order, peace, joy, harmony, goodness with others. And until we have that experience, it's really hard to share it. And I know the gift has already given, and everyone has received it. We get to open the package. We get to decide how much we allow. So in this moment, in this instant, I allow more divinity to show up as me. And I allow more divinity to be experienced by me. And I know that same possibility of truth for each and all. Celebrating this opportunity to be one in the one with everyone else, all equally valid, all equally included, all equally gifted and appointed, divinely directed and accepted. I relax into these words. I know they are true, and I let them be. And so it is.